She warned me I was dangerous, but the truth is, I was only dangerous for her heart. I
Well,
never
what are
thought
you
a
waiting
single
for?
sentence could change the way I saw someone, but it happened that Saturday afternoon. I was at my friend Daniel's house, the same place I had spent countless weekends before, messy living room, faint smell of coffee, old family pictures hanging in a crooked line along the hallway. Everything felt familiar, almost routine. Except for her. His mom. She wasn't supposed to be the kind of person I noticed. Not really. But when she walked into the kitchen that day, I found myself pausing mid-sentence. She had her dark hair tied back loosely, a few strands falling around her face in a way that made her look less like someone's mom, and more like a woman who had forgotten how beautiful she really was. She wore a simple cardigan, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, revealing elegant wrists that moved with practiced ease as she carried a tray of glasses to the table. She glanced at me only briefly, but that one look felt heavier than it should have. It lingered. Her eyes had that quiet sharpness, the kind you don't expect until they catch you doing something you shouldn't, like staring too long. I tried to mask it, picking up my drink quickly, pretending I hadn't been lost in the curve of her smile or the graceful way she carried herself. But she noticed. She always noticed. It was later, when Daniel left the room to grab something from upstairs, that the moment slipped in. Just the two of us, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I was rinsing a plate, trying to seem casual, when she leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Her voice was low, almost amused. "You're dangerous," she said. The word startled me. For a second, I thought she meant something else, that maybe I had done something wrong, or that my thoughts were more visible than I realized. But the way she said it, it wasn't angry. It wasn't even serious. It was playful, but with an edge that told me she wasn't entirely joking. I laughed, unsure of how else to react, but my chest tightened. Dangerous. To her. Or to myself. Her lips curved into a knowing smile, and before I could reply, Daniel's footsteps returned down the stairs, pulling us both back into the safety of normalcy. But the word stayed with me, echoing in the back of my mind. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop replaying it. The way she looked at me, like she had seen right through the mask of casual politeness. The way her tone carried more weight than the words themselves. It wasn't just an observation, it was a warning. And yet, warnings have a strange way of sparking curiosity. That day marked the beginning of something I couldn't fully understand at the time. A shift. A quiet spark in an ordinary kitchen. A moment where the world didn't change, but I did. Because from then on, I couldn't stop thinking about her. After that first moment, everything between us shifted, though on the surface, nothing looked different at all. I still came over to Daniel's place like I always did. We still played video games, raided the fridge, and argued over who cheated during card games. His mom floated in and out of the background like she always had. But to me, the air seemed heavier, charged with an awareness I couldn't quite put down. I started to notice the little things about her, the kind of things I'd never paid attention to before. The way she hummed quietly when she cooked, soft tunes that trailed off whenever someone entered the kitchen. The way her fingers tapped the edge of a mug while she listened, as if marking time to a rhythm only she could hear. Even the faint perfume she wore seemed different now, lingering in the air long after she passed by, pulling my attention in ways I didn't expect. And she noticed me too. Not openly, never enough to raise suspicion, but in those stolen seconds where our worlds aligned. Her eyes would meet mine across the table a fraction longer than necessary when she asked if I wanted more tea. She'd tilt her head slightly, as though she were curious about what was going on in my mind. When she laughed, her voice softened, and sometimes, though maybe I imagined it, she seemed to laugh just for me. One evening stands out in my memory. Daniel had gone upstairs to take a call, leaving me in the living room with her. The television was playing softly, flickering light across her face. She sat at the far end of the couch, leafing through a magazine, while I pretended to scroll my phone. But I couldn't help glancing at her, studying the curve of her profile, the small crease near her eyes that appeared when she squinted at the page. She must have felt it, because she lowered the magazine and caught me. For a moment, neither of us looked away. Her eyes weren't accusatory. They were searching. Almost as if she was asking herself the same question I was asking: why are we looking at each other like this? She broke the silence first, lifting her brows in a teasing way. "You're awfully quiet tonight." I forced a smile, clearing my throat. "Just tired." But the truth was, I wasn't tired at all. I was alive in a way I hadn't been before. Every nerve in my body seemed tuned to her presence. I could hear the rustle of her turning a page, the faint sound of her sipping from her glass, the quiet exhale when she leaned back. That night, as I left their house, I realized how deep this curiosity had grown. It wasn't about looks alone, it was the way she carried loneliness with grace, the way she hid her exhaustion behind polite smiles, the way she seemed to exist in a world no one truly noticed. And I wanted to notice. More than that, I wanted her to know that someone finally did. It happened on a night that should have been ordinary. Daniel had invited me over after dinner, and like usual, the living room was cluttered with empty glasses and snack bowls by the time we were done. His mom insisted she'd clean up, but I stayed behind while Daniel disappeared upstairs to grab something. "Sit down, you don't need to do that," she told me as I stacked the plates. Her voice was firm, but there was a tired edge to it. I caught the faint shadow under her eyes, the kind that comes from long days and heavier thoughts. "I don't mind," I said, carrying the dishes to the sink. "Besides, you've done enough." She gave me that look, half stern, half amused. "You're supposed to be the guest." "Then let me be the helpful kind," I replied, smiling. She shook her head, but there was a trace of warmth in the gesture. We fell into an easy rhythm, me rinsing, her drying. The clinking of glasses filled the silence until it wasn't silence at all, it was something more charged, something that seemed to hum between us. It was when our hands brushed over the same glass that everything shifted. Just the barest touch, her fingers grazing mine as I passed it over, but it stopped me cold. My pulse jumped, and when I glanced at her, she was already looking at me. Her eyes widened just slightly, her lips parting as if to say something, but no words came. The air thickened. For a moment it was just the two of us in the quiet kitchen, and that single touch felt louder than any conversation. She was the first to move, pulling her hand back quickly, almost too quickly. She set the glass down a little harder than necessary and straightened her shoulders, reclaiming her composure. "You need to be careful," she said softly, almost under her breath. I froze. Careful of what? Careful of her? Or of myself? The weight of her words pressed into me, but instead of retreating, I felt an odd clarity. "Only with people I don't trust," I murmured, my eyes fixed on hers. For a long second, neither of us blinked. The refrigerator hummed, the faucet dripped, but all I could hear was the thudding of my own heartbeat. Then she looked away, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, as if that small gesture could undo what had just happened. The moment passed, but it left its mark. The rest of the night unfolded as though nothing had happened. Daniel came back, we laughed, we talked, the world carried on. But beneath it, a new boundary had been drawn, and just as quickly, tested. And I realized then, it wasn't just me noticing her anymore. She noticed me too. It was late one evening when the walls between us began to crack. Daniel had gone out unexpectedly, leaving me alone in the house. I thought I'd kill time with the TV, but instead, I found myself in the living room with her. She sat on the couch, the lamplight spilling over her face, shadows softening the lines of her expression. There was a stillness about her that felt heavier than silence, as though she'd been carrying it for too long. I hesitated at first, unsure if I should sit, unsure if I was crossing some invisible line just by being there. But she looked up from the book in her hands and offered a small smile. It wasn't her usual polite one, it was tired, almost fragile. "You can sit," she said gently, patting the cushion beside her. So I did. For a while, we didn't speak. The only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock and the low hum of the lamp. Then, out of nowhere, she sighed. Not a casual sigh, but the kind that drags something out of you, something you've been holding back. Some days, she began, her voice low, I wonder if anyone even sees me anymore. Her words hit me harder than I expected. She didn't look at me when she said them. Her eyes were fixed on the carpet, her hands folded tightly in her lap. What do you mean? I asked carefully. She let out a small laugh, one without joy. I mean, I'm everyone's support system. The dependable one. The mom who makes sure everything runs smoothly. But when the day ends, I'm just invisible. People see what I do, not who I am. I didn't know what to say at first. She wasn't asking for sympathy, she was confessing something raw, something rarely spoken aloud. I leaned forward slightly, trying to catch her eyes. You don't seem invisible to me, I said softly. Her gaze lifted then, and for the first time, I saw something behind her eyes, something vulnerable, something unguarded. She searched my face as though testing whether I meant it. I did. When her voice wavered again, I acted before I thought. I reached out and took her hand. Not boldly, not with intention beyond comfort. Just a steady touch, my thumb brushing lightly against her knuckles. Her skin was warm, her fingers tense at first, but then they softened, resting gently in mine. She didn't pull away. That single touch seemed to steady her. Her shoulders relaxed, her breathing evened, and for a long while, neither of us spoke. It wasn't about attraction in that moment, it was about recognition. About someone finally seeing her, not as a title, not as a role, but as a woman with her own fears and quiet loneliness. And in that silence, I realized something, whatever was happening between us wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was connection. After that night, something changed between us, something subtle, but undeniable. The air around her felt different. When I walked into the house, her eyes found mine more quickly, and when I left, her gaze lingered a moment too long at the door. It wasn't a spoken agreement, not even a conscious one. But it was there, threading itself into the simplest of moments. I noticed it in her laugh first. She'd always laughed lightly, a polite sound meant to keep conversations easy. But now, whenever I said something, even the smallest joke, her laughter felt warmer, fuller, as though she wasn't laughing at what I said but at the way it came from me. And when she laughed, she looked down, as if afraid that meeting my eyes would say too much. I caught myself staring more often too. Not the kind of staring that could be brushed off, but the kind that memorized. The slope of her shoulders when she leaned against the counter, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the quiet focus on her face when she read. I found beauty not in grand gestures, but in the details, the small, overlooked pieces of her that made her more real than perfect. One afternoon, I stopped by when Daniel wasn't home yet. She opened the door, a little surprised to see me, but she didn't send me away. Instead, she motioned for me to come inside, her voice calm but her hands fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. I followed her into the kitchen, where sunlight spilled across the tiled floor, making everything glow just a little softer. We talked, about nothing, really. About groceries, about the weather, about how the old tree in the yard looked like it might finally give in to the wind. But underneath the surface chatter, there was something else building. Every word carried weight, every silence stretched just a second longer than before. And then it came, the moment when she leaned against the counter, crossing her arms as if to put up a wall, but her voice betrayed her. "You're dangerous," she whispered again, repeating the words she had once said half in jest. But this time, the tone was different. Her voice was softer, almost trembling, as if she were admitting more than warning. I stepped closer, not too close, but enough that she felt the shift in the air. My eyes locked on hers, and before I could stop myself, the words slipped out, steady and quiet, "Only for you." Her lips parted, her breath catching, and for a heartbeat, the world stood still. The sunlight, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the scent of coffee, it all faded until there was only her, standing inches away, torn between retreat and surrender. She looked away first, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear with a shaky hand, trying to restore control. But the warmth in her cheeks gave her away. And though nothing more happened, I knew then, the line we'd both been pretending not to see had already been crossed. The storm came without warning. The sky turned gray by late afternoon, and by evening the rain was falling in thick, heavy sheets, drumming against the windows. I had been at Daniel's house when the thunder rolled in, and by the time he decided to head out to meet some friends, the storm had already swallowed the streets. He tossed me the spare key before leaving. "Stay if you want," he said casually, completely unaware of what that really meant. The house felt different in the storm. The laughter and chatter of a usual evening weren't there. It was quiet, except for the sound of rain thrumming on the roof and the occasional crack of thunder splitting the air. I found her standing outside on the covered porch, her arms folded loosely across her chest as she watched the rain. She didn't turn when I slid the door open and stepped out, though I knew she'd heard me. The scent of rain filled the air, sharp and earthy, mixing with the faint trace of her perfume. I moved to stand beside her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off her, but not so close as to touch. For a long while, we just stood there. Watching. Listening. The storm became our silence, carrying everything we couldn't say. Finally, I broke it. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I asked. Her lips curved faintly, though her eyes stayed on the storm. Beautiful, and dangerous. The word hit me again, the one she seemed to always circle back to. Dangerous. Except now, there was no teasing in her tone, only something softer, something that felt like surrender and fear at the same time. I turned my head, studying her profile in the dim light. Raindrops glittered at the edge of her hair where the wind had caught them. She looked strong, unshaken, yet there was a quiet tremor in her voice that betrayed her. Without thinking, I lifted my hand. A single strand of damp hair had fallen across her cheek, clinging to her skin. Slowly, carefully, I brushed it back, my fingers grazing the line of her face. She closed her eyes. Just for a moment, but enough. Her breath caught, her body still, as though the world had stopped moving with that one small touch. When her eyes opened again, they met mine. And in them, I saw the truth, desire she hadn't spoken, conflict she couldn't hide. The rain thundered harder, but all I could hear was the quiet thudding of my own heartbeat. "This can't happen," she whispered. Her words were firm, but her voice trembled, carrying none of the certainty her lips tried to form. I didn't move closer. I didn't push. I just let the silence stretch, her words hanging in the storm. Because I knew what she knew, that it already had happened, in every way that mattered. She stepped back first, her arms folding tighter, as though bracing herself against more than just the rain. I let her go, but inside, I carried that moment with me, the almost that felt more powerful than any reality. The days after the storm carried a strange stillness between us. We didn't speak of what had happened, the almost touch, the whispered words, but it lingered, heavy and undeniable, in every glance and every silence. I wasn't sure if she would avoid me, pull away, rebuild the wall we had nearly broken down. But she didn't. If anything, her presence felt closer, as though what we hadn't said mattered just as much as what we had. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when the resolution came. Daniel had left to run errands, and I found her sitting in the garden, a cup of tea in her hands. The late sun painted everything in soft gold, the kind of light that makes the world look gentler than it is. I hesitated at the doorway, unsure if I should join her, but she looked up and gave me a small, almost weary smile. "You can sit," she said, her voice calm but tender. I sat across from her at the small wooden table, the scent of jasmine from the nearby flowers hanging in the air. For a while, we didn't talk. She sipped her tea, and I watched the way the sunlight caught in her hair, the way her eyes seemed far away. Finally, she set her cup down and spoke. You make me feel, she stopped, searching for the words. Alive in a way I haven't felt in years. Her admission wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple, fragile, but it held more weight than anything she had ever said to me. My chest tightened, and I leaned forward slightly, not daring to break the moment. You deserve to feel that way, I said softly. Every day. She smiled, but it was a sad smile, touched with the knowledge of what couldn't be. You don't understand. This, us, it's not simple. People would talk. They'd judge. And maybe they'd be right. I shook my head, my voice steady. Maybe. But I don't care what they think. I care about you. For the first time, her composure cracked. Her eyes glistened, not with weakness but with relief, as if hearing those words gave her permission to let go of the burden she'd been carrying. She reached across the table then, her hand trembling just slightly as it found mine. Her fingers curled into mine, warm and certain. The contact wasn't bold, wasn't reckless. It was gentle, deliberate, an acknowledgement that what existed between us was real, even if it couldn't be spoken aloud beyond that garden. We sat like that for a long time, hand in hand, the afternoon sun slipping lower as the shadows stretched across the yard. When it was finally time to leave, she stood and wrapped her arms around me in a hug that lingered longer than any before. Her cheek rested against my chest, and for a moment, I felt the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat, the soft tremor of her breath. As I held her, I realized something. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was dangerous. But not because I threatened her life, or her reputation, or her control. I was dangerous because I saw her, not the role she played, not the mask she wore, but the woman she was. And once seen, she could never be unseen again. That was our truth. Quiet. Unspoken. But real.